Hey, it is now 6 p.m. and I'd like to open the meeting. Adam, will you take roll call?
Thank you, Chair. Bartolo Square North, Nate Castillo. Bartolo Square South, Justin Richards. Blackstock North, Nancy Rand. Blackstock South, Christopher Bissonette. Bryce Canyon North, John Hike. Cabrillo, Rainey Stefan. Cal Giesler, Teresa Salazar. Carriage Square, Lynn Schulman. Channel Islands, Dave Copper. College Estates, John Beck. Diamond Bar, Dennis Ralph. East Village, Ronald Vallejo. El Rio West, Dan Ryberg. 5 Points Northeast, Pat Brown. Fremont North, Dave Ebbett. Fremont South, Kim Winch. Hobson Park East, Roger Poirier. Hobson Park West, Cecilia Ravello. Kamala Park, Bill Winter. La Colonia, Ramon Lopez.
Here.
Orchard Park, Diana Velzi.
Here.
Oxnard Dunes, Lisa Hewitt. Here. Oxnard Shores, Walt Hagedum. Pleasant Valley Estates, Rosanna Biggerstaff.
Here.
Redwood, Carlos Quiros. Rio Lindo, Sandy Diaz.
Here.
River Park, Paul Sheneblin.
Here.
Rose Park, Alfonso Arroyo. Sea Air, Edward Castillo. Seaview Estates, Isaac Califf. Sierra Linda, Sergio Garcia. South Bank, Debbie Aravello.
Here.
Or-
Submit 11 for Deb.
Thank you. South Winds, Sophia Vega. Tierra Vista, Christina Thomas. Via Marina, Doug Tauber. Wagon Wheel, Amanda Meir.
Here.
West Village, Michael Gleason. Wilson, Angela Whitecomb. And Windsor North, Andres Sanchez. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Adam. And before we get started, I'd like to welcome Naomi Corpez. She's the new chair of Cypress Neighborhood, and she's joining us tonight because she had to work on either YouTube or Zoom. So I'm not sure which, but anyway, so I'd like to welcome Naomi Corpez. Okay, so let's all do the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand and place your hand on your heart. Oh, okay. Will everybody take a look at last month's May 1st meeting minutes and make any requests for changes if needed?
I move to approve the minutes.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, the minutes are, a motion was made to approve the minutes as written by Amanda Meir, seconded by Lisa. Lisa Hewitt, I know her name. All in favor, please say aye. Okay, minutes are approved as written. Okay, public comments. At this time, a person may address the INCO on matters within the subject matter jurisdiction of the INCO. The INCO cannot enter into detailed discussion or take any action on any items presented during public comments at this time. Such items may only be referred to the executive secretary for administrative action or scheduled on a subsequent agenda for discussion. Public comments on items on the agenda will be considered at the time of consideration of the agenda item. Adam, do we have anybody that wants to make a public comment?
We do. We have Andrew Conley.
Okay, well, come on up to the microphone and,
Actually, we have him on Zoom.
pardon?
We have him on Zoom.
Oh, Zoom, okay, all right. And Andy Conlon, you said?
That's correct.
Andy Conley, yes.
Okay,
Thank you, Andy. You have 3 minutes.
Great, thank you, Adam. And hello, Neighborhood Council members. My name is Andy Conley. I am with the West Ventura County Business Alliance. That is the merger of the Oxnard and Camarillo Chambers of Commerce. The reason I wanted to speak to you today is we actually have an event coming up in a couple months called the Community and Business Awards. We hold these every year. This will actually be the 74th annual awards. This is going to be happening on August 15th at the Tower Club. But the reason I wanted to reach out to you all is to ask you for your help, because for this to happen, we need to get nominations for both individuals and businesses within Oxnard, which are really deserving of the different awards that we offer. And so I would love it if you were able to share within your neighborhoods that this opportunity, that if there is someone who you believe deserves this honor, that you can submit one of the applications online on our website at wvcba.org. And then that way we can have a whole lot of different nominations that we can choose from, and our selection committee can award the best. So thank you very much for this time, and I appreciate you considering this. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you repeat your website individually and maybe send to Adam contact information?
Yes, I can send all that to Adam, but our main website is wvcba.org.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else? We have somebody, we got 2 people, 3 people in the audience here. Go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, Neighborhood Council. My name is Jessica, and this is Jacqueline, and we are students at Oxnard College and fellows with CFROG and Climate CFROG. We're here to tell you about a community meeting happening on June 18th at 6 p.m. At Jose R. Flores Saticoy Community Center. This meeting is hosted by Cal Gem and the Department of Conservation to discuss the plugging and permanent sealing of oil and gas wells in Oxnard area. Recent state and federal funding have enabled Cal Conservation to expand efforts to permanently seal idle wells that pose environmental and safety hazards. Contracts of this work have been completed, and the plugging and sealing of process of critical wells will begin in Ventura County. This meeting aims to inform residents about the work coming and address concerns anyone might have about where the work is taking place and how it will proceed. This workshop will be held in Spanish, Mixteco, and English, with headsets available for those who are not bilingual. Activities for kids and light refreshments will be provided.
Thank you. Go ahead.
When oil and gas wells aren't properly plugged and sealed after use, they leak methane and other harmful pollutants into our communities, threatening our health, safety, and well-being. While CalGEM and the Department of Conservation have made the responsible decision to begin properly plugging and remediating these wells, we want to ensure they are doing so in a way that meets the needs and concerns of the community. A big concern here is who will be paying for the plugging of these wells, and ensuring that taxpayers don't bear the financial burden of cleanup. We want to ensure that oil and gas operations are held accountable to the cost of doing business here in Ventura County. With that being said, if you are interested and available to attend, we will leave some flyers with the RSVP info up at the front. We'll also leave our contact information in case anyone would like to reach out for more information. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. Did you want to come up? Okay. All right. Is there anybody else, Adam?
There's no one else online.
Okay, all right, let's move on. New business, subject fiscal year 2024-25 proposal budget, that the INCO general membership receive a report on the city fiscal year 2024-25 proposed budget, which will be by Mark Sewell and Tanya Williams.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Mark Sewell, I'm Assistant Chief Financial Officer, and I'm joined by Tanya Williams, who's the Budget Manager for the city. And we were in this very place last night. I don't know if any of you were able to watch the council meeting where the public hearing for the 2024-25 proposed budgets, and hopefully you've had an opportunity as well to see some of the staff reports and the presentations along with that. And so one of the key things I wanted to do for your benefit tonight was to share with you the new way we're trying to present the budget for all the residents and interested parties. And we have a new system this year whereby we are able to present the budget online, and you can navigate the different areas of the budget, and I'm going to sort of walk you through that. And if there are any questions or comments that you have, then happy to answer what I can and take away anything that I can't. And then obviously Tanya will be able to explain to you some of the other factors and highlights for this year's proposed budget. And so where we are in the timeline, we had the public hearing last night. We're back at council on the 18th of June, so I apologise to the speakers that we've got a clash there. But I will be here, unfortunately, because, well, fortunately and unfortunately, because that will be the adoption, hopefully, of the full budget for next fiscal year. All right, so if at any point you want to pause me, stop me, ask me questions, please do. And then I'll happily share with you what we've got online. Okay, so we can see on the screens, here we are. This is the city's website, so anyone can access this from anywhere. This is just the very first page. As you type in oxnard.gov, this is what you're greeted with. So if you scroll down, it's actually one of the first things you can find is our proposed budget. And it brings you to a sort of landing page. And it really depends on what you want to do. You can kind of follow the process of the budget. You can view the agenda reports. You can have links to the particular meetings and find out what was discussed. And then here's your click to take you through to the kind of the budget online. It's kind of, we do have the ability to produce a book, but we are now in 2024. And so we're taking the opportunity to kind of advance a little bit. So what you have here is a menu option along the top for different sort of sections of the book, if you want to think about it in that way. This will also work on a mobile phone, although it's not as good and not as easy to see on a mobile phone, but if you shrink the screen, you can see how that will work. And so you're greeted with a home page. Gives you kind of a little bit of details about what you'll find on this site. We'll just say as well, you can view this in any language. This is linked into Google Translate, so if you want to see it in Afrikaans, then good luck to you. Don't know if we've got any South Africans here tonight that would help us with that, but you can select any language you want. I'm going to stick with English if you don't mind. This will be a lot harder if you want me to do it in Afrikaans. And so your budget home is really there. And then as you sort of click on these, you can start to see, well, what else can I take a look at as I navigate through this budget? So here's a bit of like kind of the static information. Who are elected officials? Who's the senior leadership team? Right? So if you click on these, it'll take you through. Right? So there we go. There's our glorious council. Here's our equally glorious senior leadership team. And then when we get into some of the detail, really, this is where it starts to frame the message. So this is our city manager, Alex Nguyen. This is his message to the mayor and council and ultimately you guys and all the citizens of Oxnard. And he goes some way to explain kind of what the thought process was behind this budget. Where's Oxnard been? Where's it going? And all that kind of stuff. And so some of the highlights here, you guys will know that a few years back, Oxnard was in a pretty poor financial state and had structural deficits and really was getting close to running out of money. Well, as was mentioned last night and over the course of many years of council meetings, there's been a lot of difficult conversations, difficult decisions that have ultimately led to a much improved financial position. Right? There's a number of key factors for that. The passing of Measure E has clearly helped with more revenue coming in. It's about $57 million a year. We have the very large Amazon fulfillment center, which is also helping with the sales tax coming into the city of Oxnard. And of course, on the expense side, there were some very difficult decisions and things had to be cut at certain points, which meant obviously, the city was spending less of its revenue. But he goes and explains kind of where we've been and some of the things that we still have uncertainty for. But what we do know is that as we go into next fiscal year, we will be in probably the strongest position the city has been in maybe ever, certainly within the living memory of everyone who's working here currently right now, in that we are projecting a surplus for the general fund of about $35 million this year. Okay, Oxnard hasn't won the lottery. We suddenly haven't just like, where's this come from? And there are some kind of one-time factors that have got us to that point, so we can't just assume we're going to continue to be going on in that way. And so the city manager is recommending a budget that recognizes that fact it's one time. and as some ideas of what we think prudently we can do with that, while still investing in public safety, community services, parks, infrastructure. And so again, you may have followed all of this, and I don't want to kind of take too much of your time repeating what you've already heard or what you could have already have read. But this is in here, and then as you scroll down, you start to see some numbers, right? Some of us get excited with numbers. We work in finance, so you forgive us. And so this will show you kind of the adopted expenditure budget for the current fiscal year and then what we're proposing next fiscal year. So you can see which funds are recommending more or less funding. And you scroll all the way down. And then you can see the capital spending as well, and you can see a significant increase in capital, primarily driven by state grants. Almost $100 million of this increase is for the work that's going to happen on Rice and Fifth with the overpass. Believe it or not, that's almost $100 million, and that's all externally funded. So there's no taxpayer funding from the City of Oxnard, that's coming from the state. So our budget looks like it's growing significantly, and it is, but it's not all off the backs of the residents of Oxnard. So that's us leveraging state and other federal funds. And then as we scroll down, we also are responsible for reporting the Housing Authority, and their budget is $42 million. So we're almost, when you add all this up, almost $1 billion city right now. All right? So there's the main page, right? So there's kind of your headlines, and it talks to some of the challenges that we've got as well. We've got an uncertain election coming up. And we all got ideas and opinions on that. Who knows what that's going to turn out and play out? Who knows where the election is, what the economy is going to do? Who knows what all of the instability around the world in terms of all the conflicts, how does that impact us here? So really what we're saying is, although we're in a good financial position right now, we don't want to ruin that, we don't want to get lazy, and we don't want to start wasting that money. And so one of the key things in here is a recommendation to actually send $20 million towards our long-term pension and OPEB, which means other post-employment benefits. Think of it like putting a payment towards a principal on your mortgage, but in really it's even worse than that, because the pension debt is more like a credit card debt. If you only make your minimum payments, you end up paying more in the long run, right? So there's a lot of things in this budget because the city's in a fortunate position. So that's what kind of explains that in general. And as you're looking through the rest of this site, and I will speed up now, you can see the org charts, you can see the community profile, the council districts, the priorities. That's kind of all the framing documentation for the budget. You want to get started into some real detail about things, and you're interested in the general fund or Measure O, or you want to know what's going on with the utility funds, this is where you can select that. So if you click on this, it takes you through to that page, gives you just a little blurb of what the general fund is. A couple of graphs here and what we're expecting. Now these numbers were the numbers that we had in place when we went to the Finance and Governance Committee back in May. We will be updating this site after the full budget is adopted. Now, the main thing to take away from that is that the changes aren't that material. This is still a really useful guide. If you read this and understand this, it's not going to be that much different to what council are going to talk about in 2 weeks' time. Clearly, the staff report that we issue for that will also have those updates. So again, a couple of little pie charts. You can start to see how the revenue is generated, what type of revenue is coming in and all that kind of stuff. With the passing of Measure E, by far now the biggest source of income for the city is sales tax. And then property tax is the other large portion. Then you see we have slivers of other types of revenue. So again, there's your major funds, and you can see what's going on with water, see some accomplishments. Wait for this to just load a quick second. Here we go. So here we get some grant funding. So water's getting had a little bit of funding in the past. Here we go. So we're getting filled up now. So you can see again what the actual revenues and expenditures have been, what the current year budget is, and then what's proposed for next year. So depending on what you're interested in, you can find it in here. Moving forward, you can then actually, if you want to drill into specific departments, I want to know what the fire department's doing, I want to know what the police department's doing, I want to know what's going on with the city attorney's office. Move over and you can come across in here, you can pick any department you want to see. I know, I'll pick finance, one of the most exciting departments in the city. And here's our structure. Here's our mission, some programs. What do we do? What are our accomplishments? How many staff do we have? How's that changed over time? How's our funding changed over time? Et cetera, okay? So once you've exhausted all of that, You can see again, if you want to see divisions of public works, you want to see the Gold Fund, you want to see what's going on in parks and trees, you can move across to the CIP plan, and you can say, okay, what's funded or recommended to be funded, subject to 2 weeks' time's council's approval, across the different funds for the different capital projects that we want to see going forward. Remember, this is only 1 year of the 5-year plan. But again, depending on what you're interested in, you can see, okay, what are we looking to actually commit? And in this case, just over $200 million towards, okay? And as I said earlier, here's your $98 million, of which 95.9 is for the Rice Avenue and 5th Street. Apologies, that's a little small, but it's there. Beyond that then, if you want to see, okay, just show me all the revenue by fund. There you go. Show me all the expenditures by fund. It's in here. If you want to see more of a long-term plan, okay, what's coming up for the general fund? What are we assuming is going to happen not just this year, but what's coming on along, right? So again, we're showing you what we currently know and what we currently think. Some narrative in there, and then ultimately some numbers again. So you can see kind of what trajectory we think we're going to be on at this point in time. Now, it's not to say that we're not going to do anything in the next 5 years and just let these numbers come at us and hit us. Clearly, we're going to be looking at it and taking guidance and feedback from council and the community. And then again, if you're interested in how many employees are at the city, here's the chart that shows you how that's changed over time and in which departments. How much debt does the city currently have? And how much does it cost us to service that next year? So you can see across the whole city, well, in the general fund, let's just do that. $54 million currently of debt. This doesn't include pensions. This is just borrowing money for, vehicles, buildings, streets, that kind of stuff. And then carry on. If you're like, what are you talking about? I don't even know what the funds are and all that kind of stuff. We're trying to help you now in here by saying, okay, well, here's a description of all the different funds and how does that work, all right? We did change our ERP system a couple of years ago, and some of you might have been used to knowing that in our old system, your LMD was number 187 or 175. Well, this will give you your crosswalk so you can find, if it was 147, it's now subfund 2270. So again, it's helping people to just sort of learn how to find what they're interested in. Then also, it's not just about, well, where are the funds? Well, like, what do you mean when you talk about property tax, right? We know we pay it, but like, what does it really mean? So this gives you some definitions of some of the key terms you'll hear people throwing around, and then gives you an opportunity to kind of understand what we're talking about. Lots of definitions in here. We do speak a different language at times. So that's to help you. Again, sometimes we get questions around, well, how do you actually then charge us for all these different indirect costs? There's lots of detail in here. You can lose yourself in all this information, and I don't know how exciting it's going to be for you all to actually look at all of this. Master fee schedule, this again is like what things cost to do different permits, different activities. It's all in here. And then within here as well, finally, when council do adopt, there's a number of legal documentation resolutions. They'll be in here so that people can see, okay, what's the actual legal framework to which we have to spend this money. And then finally in here, a one-stop shop, kind of an index, if you like, or a table of contents for where you want to find what you want to find. So apologies if that was a little long, but no. I'm pretty excited about this because this is
I really like
a lot of time and effort. So
I really like this new system. If I were to want to look up risk management, what their operating budget is risk management under risk management, or is it under a different title, depending on what city you work for?
Risk management is an internal service fund. Mm-hmm. And where is risk management?
I was trying to catch it when you were going through it, but I missed it.
think it might be within the Human Resources Department.
Probably, yeah. It's where it usually is, but.
Yeah.
Yep, right there, risk management, okay.
So there's risk management in terms of the org chart. And then here's a description of what risk management does. And then some accomplishments, there might be some accomplishments as relates to risk management in there. And then here's your risk management FTEs. And then what you need to know for the financials is that risk management is actually 2 funds. We have the public liability and insurance fund, and then we have the workers' comp fund. So again, if you weren't totally sure of that, then you would be able to go to these budget schedules, find that glossary of fund descriptions and things like that, and then that would hopefully help to point you and then find that's in here. So what this, it doesn't currently have, and the company that we purchased this software from are working on, is some form of kind of search engine. We're all got used to now just being able to go into Google and search wherever we want, and boom, 25,000 things come up and we instantly find what we're into, right? And the algorithms are so good on all social media that we're just so programmed to just expect to find what we want to find. We're still a local government, we're catching up. And so at some point we'll hopefully have that kind of search. So if you typed in risk management, for example, then hopefully it would bring you back, do you want to see this, or this as related to risk management?
Okay, thank you. Okay, does anybody have any questions for Mark Sewell? Anybody? No? Was there any big changes that we should know about from the Measure M videos that you guys sent us? They were done prior to, I think, the May 26th meeting or something? Was there any big CIP changes or anything like that?
Yeah, so I wouldn't class anything as big in context of a almost $1 billion city, but depending on what you're interested in, they're obviously going to be potentially big to you. So in the staff report that's going to come out very soon for the next the budget adoption hearing on the 18th, there's going to be a section in there that speaks to, like, walks you through what those changes are. So there are 6 changes basically. And some of them are very small, like one is $9,000 change to 1 LMD. Another change is related to some reorganization of bringing the billing and licensing department into as a division now of the finance department. No real economic impact to that, just a reorganization and changes some of the classifications on the positions. There's a proposal for $350,000 of Measure O money to be used to pay for the senior nutrition program, with the County of Ventura no longer able to support that for the residents of Oxnard. There's another adjustment for CFDs and the waterways to just bring the budget in line with the levy assessments, because there are a lot of parallel processes to try to produce a city budget that not everything can be done in series and they kind of then come together at the end. And then last night at council, council actually directed staff to add 2 CIP projects from the general fund. One was $600,000 for the South Oxnard Centre. There was a request from Councilmember Basua regarding some of the sort of safety of the lighting there, and so that's likely to be approved by council in a couple of weeks. That's $600,000. And there was also discussions around the police facilities, with ultimately staff receiving direction to include $300,000 in the CIP for a police facilities study. Quite a comprehensive look at where all these assets are and what's the best use and how can we use them. So they're the key kind of, have we missed anything? Yeah, they're the key. Tanya's really the brains behind this, by the way. I'm the talker and she's the brains. So just checking with her. So they're the main ones.
Okay, go ahead, Matt.
Okay, so thank you so much. This website is extremely helpful. It's one of the better ones that I've seen in local governments, and accessibility, especially for the public, and the ease of navigating and trying to find exactly what you're looking for. So I'm looking at some information at one of the presentations that that was sent out. It is titled the fiscal year 24-25 proposed annual budget, additional information, the June 4th. This is what I'm looking at. We have a printed out copy. I was listening to you speak, looking at the presentation, but I figured it's pretty helpful to see. So when I'm looking at the general fund expenditures, I noticed in that presentation that for the non-departmental, it's 59.3%, and that includes some of the pension payments, correct? For the non-departmental, the pension pay down, is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, and what's the total pension debt that the city currently has?
So I'm going to give you a round number. I can't remember the exact number, but it's slightly north of 350 million, I think.
Okay.
And that changes each year.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, it would have been about 250,000, and that's all because in that fiscal year, CalPERS made like a 22% gain on their investments, and because they discount our future liabilities at their assumed rate, sorry, I'm going to get technical, of 6.8%, Anytime that they earn more than 6.8% on their investments, we see our unfunded liability drop. And so because they smashed it in 21% versus it took $100 million off. Now, of course, the next year, they hit like 6% instead of 6.8, and then it creeps up again. And so it's constantly a moving piece, but I think on average, it's probably around 3 to 350.
Okay. And then looking at the next biggest one is the city manager's office. Is that correct with the 38.6%? Sorry.
Which page are you looking at?
I'm sorry. I'm on page 7. Technically slide 8, but if you're looking at it, yeah, it's slide number 8 is what I'm looking at, and it's 2 slides per page. So my apologies on saying page 7.
Yep.
Okay. And is that just for staffing? Is it for maintenance? I'm just trying to look at, when we're looking at some of the departments, such as community development, and you're looking at the city manager's office, and I understand the city manager has a city to manage, and so therefore their expenditures are probably going to be significantly more. But 38.6% of the general fund expenditures.
Okay, let me help you on that one. So it's not 38.6% of the general fund expenditures. That's the increase compared to last year. So,
I should have clarified. That's my mistake. So that it's increasing 38.6%.
Yes,
okay,
yes.
so
why is that?
yeah.
Right. So within the city manager's
lot.
So within the city manager's office, that's where we hold some kind of what would we call them? Kind of like central programming. So, for example, one of the key reasons for that increase of $500,000 is this year there's $500,000 in the budget for a study for the Carnegie Art Center for some Native American art. I believe there's some need for us to go out there and do some work in that regard. And so that's where that $500,000 has been residing. So you could take, well, hang on a minute, what's that got to do with the city manager's office? I think it really came through the office. That's where the request came from. So it kind of houses some things which are of a general city need and benefit. We also pay things like, is it the theatre group? No, that's out of the yeah.
Just because just for that one particular example, I understand that it might come from the city manager's office, but in my very crude understanding of all of the city departments, it would seem to be that would make more sense under the cultural and community services or a community development department rather than the city manager's office. So I guess that's my main question is when we're looking at the overall city budget and the different allocations and what's being increased, you're talking about a city that needs like critical other infrastructure, we're talking about like roads or whatever it is, that to me would make more sense under, I don't know, like public works department, increasing their budget compared to a 38, almost 39% increase to a city manager's office. Not to say that I'm not picking on one department, it just happens to be minus the non-departmental, the biggest increase. And so I guess I'm also looking at the amount of increase just like in salaries as well for individuals. And so does that also increase, like what's the average COLA increase for, is like our COLAs guaranteed for some of the salary expenditures for each department? And if so, what's that increase per year?
Yeah, so we have MOUs in place already for the majority of our bargaining units. And the one main group in terms of the police department, they are currently still in constant negotiations. But I think across the board, we've applied a 3%? Yeah, a 3% COLA with the assumption then that a 5% kind of merit increase, as it were, as people move through the range, applies in January. So, of course, those who were eligible for that would again get half a year of that benefit. And so roughly 5%.
And that's for just representative employees, correct?
That's
so for like
everyone.
non-representative or like, say, exempt employees, do they also receive those type of benefits? Because I know it's not always the same. I only know this because I work for a county and I'm an exempt employee, and so we don't always see those type of things. And so I guess that's my question is, if that COLA type increase for, say, salary expenditures is going up for certain individuals, is that across the board?
Yeah, it's across the board.
Okay. And then we're talking, you said Measure E for the sales tax. Sorry, I'm not up to date on all my numbers. I'm not a numbers person. I wish I was. What is the current sales tax for the city? And I'm not quite sure if it was on here, and I think it was like on the website. And so my apologies for not knowing it off the top of my head. But what's the anticipated revenue for this year and the next couple years based off of if it does remain the same and there's not another like local ballot measure to increase the sales tax?
Yeah, for sure. And believe me, there's too many numbers for you to even try to remember.
I appreciate your understanding that.
So if you want to just draw your eye to slide 7, which is I think is just above the one you were asking me about in terms of the city manager's office, you can see the second line down, sales and use tax.
Yes.
So that includes the Measure E plus the other normal Bradley Burns portion of the general fund, right? Measure O is a separate amount, so this is just the general fund. So you can see in there, 113.6 million is what we're anticipating next year, and that compares to this year's current budget of 109 million. All right, so we're expecting a little bit of modest growth. But we aren't expecting it to grow forever. Sales tax across the state of California is actually flat or in decline in a lot of areas as interest rates have pushed up some challenges in terms of like vehicles and things like that. We in Oxnard are doing pretty well. And again, primarily we have up the Amazon fulfillment center to thank for that. Because when you look at the taxes that we actually earn from Oxnard residents spending money, that's pretty flat. That's kind of the same as the rest of California. But where we are benefiting as a city is because of the current allocation of revenue through fulfillment centers benefits the city of Oxnard. So we're picking up a larger share of the county pool than other agencies would have. And so that's one of the reasons why we're in a fortunate position at this point in time compared to other California cities. And we aren't seeing deficits. We aren't seeing the need for cuts. We aren't seeing at this stage the need for measures, because City manager shared a slide yesterday in the presentation showing there's a lot of cities around us in some wealthy areas, and they're really struggling and are considering additional tax measures. So at this point, you can again see on that slide that it's the largest portion of revenue for the general fund, and it's about $113 million. And as I say, Measure E is 57 million of that.
I just want to add something to that. Although we are currently benefiting from the Amazon tax stuff, we have state legislation possibly going to change that where we will not benefit as much in the future. Is that not correct?
That's certainly a risk, and that's what the city manager recognizes in his budget message. And one of the reasons, again, that we aren't getting overly excited about our financial position, because it can change.
No, I was thinking about that piece of legislation, and I guess that's had another question of if that is the case, and say that legislation goes before the voters, and the voters decide to not uphold that, and Measure E, correct, for the sales tax, and what other measures would the city have to go back to, because that would change the financial outlook for the city, correct?
I'm not aware of anything that necessarily puts Measure E at risk at this point in time, subject to some kind of measure to repeal it by the voters. The legislation I'm aware of is more around the Bradley Burns portion, which is the other portion of sales tax, which is managed by the county and divided to the cities based on the location of the people who make those purchases. And currently, the rules as they're written, the laws it's written by the state, is that the fulfillment center, because the fulfillment center is in Oxnard, they derive more benefit to the city of Oxnard for the sales that come through that particular building, irrespective of where they end up. That's, I believe, what's at risk, because there's clearly a number of other cities who have these fulfillment centers, receiving more sales tax revenue, and they're feeling like, well, hang on a minute, if it's our residents buying it, shouldn't we get it? And that's, I think, and that's not really for the voters, as I understand it, at that point in time. That's legislation that is going through Sacramento and is subject to their votes. And that's the risk. We don't know what that means. That could go away, or it could significantly impact us. We're just trying to be cautious and not bank on that money for the rest of, forever.
So with the current surplus, I guess my overall question is that we're paying down some of the pension liability debt that we currently do have that you've mentioned. And then the overall surplus, is that going to like a rainy day fund? I'm just I'm seeing nods, so I'm assuming yes. But just like, what is the percentage? And if you have it where we can see, that would be wonderful. And I'm sorry, I was mistaking two different pieces of legislation. One that would have to go back before the voters, and then the other piece that you were mentioning about the Amazon. So I know the current piece about what I'm going to refer to as the Amazon one that would really impact us. That has tried to go before the legislature since I was around in the legislature, which is 10 years ago, and has consistently struggled as cities who do benefit the most from it, such as like the city of Oxnard, are very much opposed to it. So it'd be interesting to see what would happen with that. So
Anything can happen, and we don't want to prejudge anything, right?
Oh yeah, no, I get that.
So to answer your question about the rainy day fund, yes. Doesn't rain very often in Oxnard, but we still need a fund for when it does. If you look down here on the screen in terms of what's on the budget message from the city manager, you can see really kind of what he's recommending of that $35 million. Again, that's just a projection for where we think we're going to end this year. It could be slightly more, it could be slightly less. We'll see when we finish up the year. 20 million to the long-term pension debt, right? 9.5, that's the amount that we would need to put back into the rainy day fund to achieve the current goal of holding 2 months worth of expenses in reserve. 16.6% is the current goal. The resolution we had last year that was passed was to try to get there in 1% increments each year. We were at 13% last year. We were due to go to 14 this year. We're recommending, while we've got this money, let's just get there, right? Let's put it in the bank. Let's make sure we only spend it when we absolutely need to. We don't get too carried away, right? And so again, it's council's prerogative if they want to do that or not. But that's the other 9.5. So on slide 9 on your handout, you see how that gets broken down. And so like real dollars now, if you look at the top right-hand corner where it says fiscal year 24-25 proposed budget, you see the beginning reserve of $27.8 million, right? There's the 9.5 million coming into it to get us to the 16.6. So basically we're saying, all being well, if council adopt this budget, we will have $37.3 million in our reserve that shouldn't really be used unless there's a really good reason to, right? And then in addition to that, there'll be 25 million of real surplus, okay? So you can add it all together and say there'll be $62.8 million in the general fund, but really we're saying that 37 million needs a ring fence around it, and that should be there if there's an economic issue or a disaster or something, right? So that 25 million is what we're calling the real surplus in that regard. And so when you take the 20 million out for the, looking down the page, you can see there's a 20 million for the pension liabilities and the long-term debt. That then gives you that ending surplus of $5.5 million. Now, council last night have already allocated potentially another 900,000 of that for those 2 CIP projects I mentioned. So therefore, we're really saying at the moment, all things being equal, about $4.6 million over and above our rainy day fund should still be there for something, right? And then I heard loud and clear last night from a number of the council members that they kind of want to wait and see how some of these things pan out. And then they have an opportunity. If our sales tax revenues do well, and if we get a favourable result in a number of these legislative issues, then perhaps there's an opportunity for funding of this or that or the other. But I think what I heard again from the mayor last night was he referenced 24 years ago where council were thinking that it's just going to be sunny every day now forever. And CalPERS is doing great, and so let's spend all this money, and then lo and behold, 25 years later, we've still got a $350 million pension liability. So therein lies the challenge and the balance, and we do it every day in our personal lives. Should I buy that new car? Should I buy that? Should I go on holiday? Should I do this and that and the other? We all want to do everything. Sometimes we can't.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I really do appreciate it. And thank you. I know that I have been asking for this type of presentation for over a year now, so I want to say thank you guys so much for coming and not only presenting to us, but for your work in putting together this wonderful website and all the other presentations that you have done. I know that all of us have been eagerly, maybe it's just me, asking all these type of questions.
That's okay.
Well, I'll take it. I'm like, it's me wanting to say like, hey, I have questions. So I wanted to say thank you, and I appreciate you guys taking your time and spending time away from your loved ones to come talk to us.
Yeah. Okay, we have somebody over here.
Hi, my name's Rosanna Biggerstaff from Pleasant Valley Estates, and I personally want to thank you guys also for putting this together. This is a great website. My question is, with the new opening of the cannabis stores in Oxnard, how much of that will go to the city?
So I forget the numbers exactly, but a percentage of all of the sales does come and benefits the general fund, which can then be used to support all of the things that the general fund does, like public safety, parks, libraries, all that kind of stuff. I believe there's also some permitting fees and all that kind of stuff. So there's no restrictions on what we can spend that money on in that sense. And so, you know, I think a few years back, everyone was thinking there was going to be piles of cash coming from cannabis. I think that's slowed down a little bit. So it's not like it's a absolute game changer for cities. It's not like there's going to be millions and millions and millions of revenue. But I certainly think it's going to be contributing enough to help provide those services.
Do we have a percentage?
I'm afraid I don't know off the top of my head what the percentage of the sales is that we receive. But I can find how much. Cannabis tax itself is projected to generate about $1.1 million next year.
Thank you.
Which as a percentage of the total general fund revenue is 0.5%.
Go ahead, Kim.
Hi, Kim Winch from Fremont South. I'm glad you brought up the taxability account, the tax that's coming up in November. I know each city is going to get affected differently if that gets passed, and I'm glad you brought up the Amazon. What I don't know is how does that affect us financially? Can you give me a number? What is it that we get out of the Amazon deal that we benefit from that might change if that gets passed?
I'd like to give you an exact number. Unfortunately, I can't because sales tax and things like that is actually confidential information, given that they are businesses that I can't say to you, we get this much from this company, this much from this company. I can share you that it's material. It's a big number.
Can you give me is it 5 million? Is it 2 million? Is it?
Again, I don't really want to say too much, but it's a big number.
Well, if it's one of the reasons that you are encouraging people in Oxnard to vote no on this, it would be helpful to know what we'd be losing. To say where it's a big number, that that's a personal limit, right? So it would be helpful to have some kind of clear vision.
It's significantly larger than the cannabis taxes that I just mentioned to you. Again, I don't want to fall foul of any of the laws around sharing too much around what private businesses generate. I would be reluctant to say much more.
But isn't it in our budget? So don't you put what comes in from that?
Yeah, absolutely. We have that information, but we don't share that publicly. So we have sales tax consultants that share with us on a regular basis how much of our sales tax is generated from different companies, but that is legally restricted information that can't be shared publicly.
Kim, I think that there's two different pieces of legislation that we were talking about. So there's the one that has to deal with basically in a very crude explanation, is say an Amazon fulfillment center is within your city. Whatever city it resides in does receive a larger portion of say the sales tax revenue compared to whatever city the person purchasing it from Amazon would go to. So say, for example, in Oxnard, there's a fulfillment center. So wherever that sales tax revenue goes, it is received by Oxnard, compared to, say, if I'm in Ventura and I'm buying something that's fulfilled in Oxnard, Ventura doesn't receive that sales tax fund. So that's one piece of legislation. I think that's the biggest one.
Tax accountability.
No. So the tax accountability one is separate, where that particular piece is where there is an initiative that would go before the voters, and currently it basically all you need is a 50% plus one to increase any measures or bonds, such as Measure E, which is what I was asking about.
So I was asking about apples and oranges.
Yes.
So it's not even.
Both are fruit, but a little bit different compared to the tax accountability, where that would actually increase it, where it would be a 2/3, which is what I was asking. Okay, so if that passes and you do have to increase it to 2/3, would you have to, because it would retroactive to about 10 years. If I'm not mistaken. And so that's why I was asking about Measure E, that if it passed within the past 10 years, it would actually have to go back before the voters, which would impact our sales tax revenue. So that's where it's different.
Back 2 years. It went back to 2022. But even so, Measure E we voted on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert on all the legalities and all that kind of stuff, but what I'll say is that there are ways in which certain fees and measures have been passed that would still enable them to be kind of legitimate even under that new rule. But I think one of the challenges I do know about that rule, if it is implemented in the way that it says, it would make it extremely difficult for public agencies to raise revenue in the future. And ultimately, how do we pay for services through revenues, right? No one likes paying taxes. I understand where this comes from. But ultimately, we all need roads, we all need public safety, we all need water, we all need all these, water's not tax, but, it really then starts to get into your own political ideologies, right? What we're saying is without knowing the facts of all of this kind of stuff, we're just trying to put a prudent budget out there that still allows us to invest more in fire, in police, in libraries, in parks, all these types of different things, as well as using this one-time surplus to help to offset some of our long-term liabilities. And we kind of have to wait and see, really.
So yeah, it was apples and oranges, Kim, but I probably confused that for some
Yeah,
of
I'm
my
sorry,
questions.
I wasn't sure what you were asking.
I got a question. What about the new Costco? How that's going to be revenue for Oxnard?
The new Costco in Camarillo.
Yes.
It may have an impact. We've spoken to some of our sales tax advisors who've shared that sometimes a Costco gets built, and Costco aren't, they're pretty smart people. They don't necessarily want to build a Costco and then completely cannibalize the sales from the Costco 9 miles down the road.
Right.
They think it's going to be net increasing. And of course, they'll want to steal from other competitors as well. So again, we are expecting there might be some impact to that. And again, Costco is a reasonably large contributor for our sales taxes. So we are cautious about that. But we don't think it's necessarily going to be doom and gloom for the Oxnard Costco just because there happens to be one in Camarillo. But again, we'll wait and see, and we aren't getting overly excited about some of the upsides, and we aren't getting overly concerned about some of the downsides. We're trying to be measured.
All right.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments or statements that they'd like to make? Okay. How about you, Tanya? You got anything to add?
Sorry, I am a talker. I said that earlier. She's the brains.
Good evening. As Mark said, he's the talker, so he kind of took a lot of my points, but that's okay. I was going to kind of focus more on the general fund surplus, which, like I said, he's touched on, but really just emphasizing that it is considered a one-time, and there's reasons as to why it is considered a one-time, not an ongoing increase, which, as we've discussed, the Amazon Fulfillment Center being one of the big reasons that our sales tax has increased, that has created this surplus, and again, the uncertainty around the legislation that may impact that. And as we also discussed, the Measure E 1.5 cent transaction and use tax, which has increased our annual revenues by approximately $57 million per year. Some other significant contributors include the influx of state and federal grant funds, such as the American Rescue Plan Act. The city received almost $60 million, and the CARES Act, Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act of $2.5 million. So those being one-time monies, then that's another reason why we're looking at this surplus as a one-time surplus. And there are many other reasons which the city manager covered in his budget message as well, but those are some of the highlights. And so, again, we also talked about the $20 million payment on the long-term debt, $9.5 million to increase the reserve to 16.6%, and then $5.5 million that we're keeping in abeyance to revisit at mid-year. Although that has slightly decreased based on the outcome of the budget hearing last night, which included $900,000 of additional CIP funding. So pretty much I was just going to highlight the surplus in terms of how we arrived at that amount. And again, it is projected. Part of that is based on fiscal year 23 ending, and then FY24 projected, which could change. But hopefully it would be somewhere close to the 35 million. So really that's all I was gonna touch on, unless there's any other questions, but those are all the comments I had. Yeah. Thank you.
I just have a quick question about the ARPA funding. So I know that there was an interim final rule about some of the responsibilities, I'm sorry, about the time in which local governments have to utilize those funds. Has Oxnard already utilized all their funding, or because there is that conversation of if you don't use it, then you have to repay it? So just wasn't quite sure on that.
Yeah, I'll pass that to Adam.
Adam.
Thank you, Ms. Muir. Regarding ARPA funding, the U.S. Treasury has announced some new obligation guidance for the spend down of ARPA funds. They remain largely unchanged. All ARPA funds have to be obligated or encumbered under contract by December 31st of this year. And then all ARPA funds have to be fully spent by December 31st, 2026. So the city still, we're on track to get all of our ARPA funding encumbered or obligated by the end of this calendar year. There is still some unspent funds remaining, but we are projecting that we won't leave any money on the table come December 31st of this year.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any more questions? Any of you guys? Yeah? No? No? She probably does. Go ahead, ask some more questions and.
That was it. That was just the main question. No, I actually don't have any more questions. I'm just the question person up here, and that's fine. I take it. So, but thank you. That was a question based off of the funding.
Okay, if there's nobody else that has any questions, thank you so much for coming tonight. It's much appreciated. We've been asking for you guys for a couple years now, and we're glad that you're here. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. Channel Islands Harbor being represented by our own Dave Copper of Channel Islands, correct? Yeah. That the INCO general membership receive a presentation on Channel Islands Harbor water quality from the Channel Islands Neighborhood Council. And with that, Dave Copper, you can come out and talk to us.
Thank you for the opportunity to update the community on our harbor water quality situation. Before I begin, I want to just thank Chuck Carter for standing right behind me there. He's the guy that is the brains behind this whole operation. He's the lead on the clean water team, and he goes out with the boats and collects the samples, sends them to the lab, analyzes the results, and come back. So much of what I'm going to talk about is based upon his good work. And I don't see, Tom's not on. Tom Canale's not on, isn't he, Adam? No, so Tom is the lead on the chair of the Marine Advisory Committee. So let's go ahead and bring up the PowerPoint if we can, Adam. All right, so we can go ahead and page down, please. Oh, try it. Let's try it. I forgot the new instructions. Perfect, okay. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the background, some of the goals that we have for the Marine Advisory Committee, what our findings are in terms of the testing results, and how you might be able to help us. So SYNC is made up of 4 communities, Mandalay Bay, Harbor Island Condominiums, Seabridge, and Westport. We represent almost 2,000 homes, and we think about 5,000 residents. We created the Marine Advisory Committee in 2019, and the team has been working on collecting the samples, as I mentioned, and analyzing the results. A little bit of background. I think we all recognize the Mandalay Bay Generating Station. And the key point here is it shut down in February 2018, and the pumping stopped. But what we didn't realize at the time was that the power station was pulling on average 1.5 billion gallons of water per month from the northern part of the harbor and pushing out into the ocean. And it created, and it's been doing that for, we think, about 6 decades or more. And the whole ecosystem in the harbor, particularly the northern part of the harbor, were based upon that flow, right? And now that's stopped. And then the other thing we looked at is, where's all the water coming from that's coming into the canal and the harbor? And I know that's very hard to read. I apologize for that. But basically, there's 5 main drains that's about 11 miles. All of them start in urban areas. Some of them then flow through the fields and into the canal. We'll talk more about some of that in a minute. So one of the things that has been an impact is, particularly due to bacteria, is that this beach called Kitty Beach near the mouth of the harbor, is shut down, or actually the signs are posted. I don't think anybody apparently, based on this picture, pays any attention to the signs, but the water is deemed unsafe. Usually, what, about 30 or to 45 days a year? 60 days a year. It's a lot. Right, so our Marine Advisory Committee has two parallel goals. One is to have safe, swimmable water for entertainment, for everyone to enjoy, and to conserve water to the extent we can for agricultural or residential usage. Because while we have a lot of water right now, 3 years ago, when we started this process, we were in a serious drought. And I think most of us would expect that could happen again without too much difficulty. So talk about our findings. That just happens to be a picture of a lot of algae in the harbor, usually that we see that in the summer months. We have 3 types of testing efforts. We have ongoing sensors. They're in the water seasonally, usually from April or May till September, October. Those sensors measure chlorophyll, dissolved oxygen, and some other things. We also have toxicity testing, which tells you if things are thriving or not thriving in the harbor. We'll talk more about that. And then we have the testing that comes from the water samples, including chemicals, bacteria, nutrients, pesticides, those kind of things. So here's a picture of the sensor that's in the water. It's covered in sea slugs. This was originally done with ABC, Aquatic Bioassay Consulting, and they currently conduct measurements of these and testing of these, cleaning of these, and they also advise us if they think there's an imminent fish kill. So a fish kill can happen when the dissolved oxygen falls below a safe limit, and I'm going to show you more about that. So here is the readings from the sensors. The green line represents chlorophyll, and the blue line represents the level of oxygen. The safe level is 5. Under 5, it's not safe for marine life. You can't really tell because this is the whole season, so I drilled down to just like 1 week. So here, if you look on the right side, there's a week July 21st to 28th, and now you see the chlorophyll dropping lower, and then the oxygen dropping lower, below 5, every single night, and then recovers during the day. It recovers during the day because the algae are using the sunlight photosynthesis to grow, and they create oxygen process, but at night they deplete the oxygen. So it's a reverse cycle. And if we had a few overcast days where there weren't getting enough sun, we'd have the risk of the dissolved oxygen level not fully recovering the next day or two. Toxicity is an interesting one. So here we have on the left side sampling, which you call generally a moderate rain, and the right side heavy rain, and the numbers that are represented the numbers of shrimp out of 100 that did not survive, right? So usually heavy rains cause some issues in the harbor, and I'll talk more about that, but the one on the right is the one to look at. So we had, I think, if I remember right, 4 sites or 5 sites that didn't have safety, didn't make it quite. So 90 was the worst one at the northern part of the canal, which kind of makes sense because the pumping stopped, and now that water is very stagnant, right? And you can see there's other sites that do better or worse. The interesting thing about toxicity, and I didn't put it in here, is last December we had 2 big heavy rains, and in the harbor, behind the harbor director's temporary office, it's been there for years, is a white sea bass enhancement facility. Not many people know about it, but what happens is the nursery for the state for the sea bass is in Carlsbad, and then they ship these little sea bass up to these enhanced facilities so they get big enough to be released for fishermen, right? So typically that pen holds about 10,000, can hold 12,000, but about 10,000 sea bass. In December, 4,000 of them didn't make it. The state veterinarian examined the situation, identified it was bacteria related, gave them special food, which I think is probably antibiotics, and then they treated the water with peroxide. So that tells me there was an issue with bacteria there. With the shrimps, because it's correlating with the rain, it makes me think it could be also bacteria, but it also could be pesticides or herbicides, right? So that's kind of a factor there. So the toxicity is helpful to know. It's like the canary in the coal mine, but the problem is we don't really know what's causing them to die. So it's still a question mark for us. So the next one is the bacteria levels. So here we see the dry on this left side, I think, and then a little bit more moisture on the right side. So what's interesting is if you look at the numbers, here the safe limit is 104. So if you're looking at this, you can see the highest one is 467. The rest look to be in the safe level, And then we took a picture of the right so you could see, okay, this is coming in, I think this is Fifth Street, it looks like, or is it Doors? Fifth Street, okay, Fifth Street. And then we look, the guys that did the sampling took pictures of the water coming off, this is off the Doors drain. And you can see there's a lot of water flowing in. And again, the bacteria and things elevate when there's more water flowing in, whether it's rain or whatever else it might be. And then you can see there's other drains, but there's not a lot of water flowing. It was a safer limit like 10 with the green arrow there. Now here we're looking again at the bacteria levels 2 times after rains. This is a couple years ago now, but we see the pattern. There's no change in the pattern, other than if you get more rain, then the numbers are elevated. So on the left, we had what we call moderate amount of rain, 0.8 of an inch roughly. And you can see readings of 241, 455, this is like an eye exam, over 1,000, over 1,200, and then other ones seem to be under 104, they're safe. But when we have a heavier rain, 1.36 inches, they're all over the safety limit by thousands, 9,000, 8,000, 3,000. It's a couple low ones, 300 or 400, but nothing at the 104 level. So we know big rains are a problem. So that kind of reinforces the issue with the toxicity that maybe it is related to bacteria, but it's not conclusive. So here's a slide where we're looking at the same one on the left, the heavier rain, and then a week later, what the sample shows us. And so what we find is the bacteria dissipate over time, right? It gets diluted basically, and so, or the bacteria has a short lifespan. I don't know which, to be honest, it's something we can look at. The other thing we do is field measurements, and this field measurements are taking water with this test kit, and we look at the level of nitrates, and the more reddish it is, the higher the levels of nitrates. And if you look at the lower right picture, you see it seems most red around sample sites 28, 29, and 30. Those 3 sites are in the Edison Canal, where intuitively you might expect more nitrates, right? They're not coming off of backyards, one would imagine. And then just a couple of pictures that shows what urban runoff can look like in a harbor. So the picture on the left is the picture by the Woolly Gate. So it's the end of the Edison Canal, the beginning of the harbor. And then the one on the right is just happens to be after a little of a windy day. And at the end of that particular channel, the wind blew all of the floating trash out there. So all of this should be preventable, right? And then I wanted to show this picture. This is a new one we've added to the deck. So not all of the drains have these kind of signs, but they probably should, because most of the water, even almost anywhere in the city, is probably going to end up in the ocean or the harbor sometime or another, right? Some of them might be recycled, but generally that's what we see happening. So some thoughts I had about how you could help us, or we can work together on this, because this is something that, while it is in our neighborhood, affects everybody that wants to use the harbor, right? And a lot of people like to do paddle boarding, kayaking, all kinds of things. So that's something I think we all should protect. So be aware of what you're doing with the drains, because it will end up, as I said, in the harbor or the ocean. You could help be a volunteer with us taking samples, going out in the boats. We go out in electric duffies. We have crews of 4 or 5 on each boat, usually take 2 boats. And then I think the thing is, and why we're here, is to ask you to help other people understand the situation and what's going on here, right? And then a couple of things that's not in the deck, so I want to share that I think are kind of important. So we've been doing this since 2019. We have met with almost all the public elected officials, city council, county board of supervisors, state assembly members, state senator Limon, right? And as a result of those collective efforts and their help, really, right, we have garnered about $3.1 million to work on this particular project. $1.3 million was ARPA, which was talked about earlier, from the city. When that happened, I went to our then supervisor Carmen and asked her to match it, and the county ultimately did. And then the state put another $500,000 in for the harbor water quality as a supplemental budget item. So that's been fairly successful. And then about a week ago, maybe a little bit more, but I think about a week ago, the city council approved a feasibility study project for harbor water quality with craft water engineering. Sadly, I mean, it's good they're doing that as a milestone. I mean, to get that much in 5 years, we thought was kind of good, though we didn't always know if it was going to happen. But the problem with that is, or the challenge is, it's a 3-year study. So I'm thinking about, as a practical person, okay, we'll have more information in 3 years, but there's some common sense things that we might be able to do today if we think about it and can get motivated to that. So that's my pitch. Chuck, would you like to add anything? Are you good? All right, yeah, I'm open for any questions you might have.
About a month ago when we talked,
Yes.
you had mentioned that there was 2 funds that you wanted support on, to ask the city for approval on. Are those the 2 that you just mentioned, or?
Yes.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, yep.
all right. And, does anybody have any questions for him? I know I probably would like to volunteer on collecting
Okay.
water samples, so,
All right, Chuck's your guy.
yeah.
I'll put that information out for my neighborhood, but do you have contact information we can?
Yes. Do you want to, can you pull some on the screen, Adam? Just type it at the end of that PowerPoint on the last page or something? So people can see it? Is that a good way to do it, or?
Are you,
I mean,
you want the last?
You could go to your webpage too, couldn't we?
They could go, yeah, if you do a search on Channel Islands Neighborhood Council, our website comes up. We have a good webmaster. But I'll give
Is
it
there
to you.
is there a particular slide in your presentation that has your contact information?
Sorry, Dave?
Is there a particular slide in your presentation that has your contact
No,
information?
I was gonna say, we just typed it in real quick, but I'll just say it. It's D as in David, COPPR 93035 @gmail.com.
Can you do that again real slower?
D as in David, then the letter COPPER, my last name Copper, and then my zip code 93035 @gmail.com. Obviously, I can remember it.
Now, you mentioned this 3-year study, that has not been funded, or that has?
It is funded, the contract has been approved. In fact, we have a kickoff meeting tomorrow morning.
Okay, and
Yeah, so
where's
it's
that
moving
at?
on.
On your, is that on your?
No, the contractors organize that. So
Okay.
we are obviously very concerned volunteers, and we've provided, as you can tell by this is a small sample of the data we've collected. And so I think that'll be helpful to the
Yeah.
consultants to get that background and so on. So
Well, I'm definitely in for our wildlife, especially in Oxnard, but everywhere, but I'm also in support of whatever funding you can get.
okay, we appreciate that, Diane.
I have a question. When you guys shut down that pump, didn't you guys already knew that was gonna happen about the,
Well, we didn't shut down the pump, but it was a state law that banned once-through cooling by the end of 2019 or 2020.
well, didn't you know that was gonna happen to that canal?
They were fair.
Well, it was a known risk a few years ago, yes. For multiple reasons. The state legislation was one. The other one was it had gone from a full-on power plant to a peaker station, meaning they only used it during peak times because
Right.
it was not cost-effective anymore, right? But I don't know that we knew it was 1.5 billion gallons a month. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things we didn't know. It comes down to, in my mind, the law of unintended consequences. The state thought it was good to save the fish in the ocean from the impairment or impalement from the waters coming out, and the result is now we have this to clean up.
Right, all right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Anybody else? Anybody online? No?
Okay.
Okay,
Well,
thank
thank you again for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much. Thank you for helping better our city. All of you. You guys work hard. Okay, all right, where am I? I gotta find my thing. Okay.
Dave, maybe you can put me on your mail
Okay,
list.
let's move on. Neighborhood chair reports. Neighborhood chairs may individually report on items of interest or concern to their neighborhoods. The INCO cannot enter into detailed discussion or take action on any item presented during these reports. Kim?
Hi, Kim Wynn from Fremont South. I'm just announcing that our next meeting will be held Wednesday, July 10th at 6 o'clock at the PAL Gym. One of the things that we're talking about, or the primary thing, is the I Street parking. And we're going to be having 2 people come and talk to us about whether we want to go to, if the people on that street want to go to curb cuts, or if they want to do permit parking, if they want to reinstitute. So if you're on I Street, come, and more flyers will go out to I Street. We'll also have an election. We also have a website now, so if you want to email me at fremontsouthcouncil@gmail.com, I will give you the link for our new website. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Lynn?
Len Schulman. I'm the chairman of the Carriage Square Neighborhood Council. And tomorrow night, we have our annual election meeting. For the first time in 24 years, I am not running for chair. which means
No.
that tonight is actually my last night as a member of the INCO. However,
You'll always be a member.
anyhow, at our last meeting, we set up a steering committee of 7 members to look into the use of our $424,000 Quimby funds to be used on Eastwood Park. And tomorrow night at the meeting, which is taking place at the current school, we will have a discussion on what has come up and ideas and so forth, and probably have a vote on what we would like to see done. Other than that, everything is going to be interesting because, as I say, we have an election tomorrow night, and I'll let you know what the results are. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn.
Good evening, everybody. Paul Schneiderlin, River Park. First, I'd like to say I'm glad to be at an INCO meeting for the first time in a while, just because there were conflicts between our neighborhood council meetings and the INCO meeting. We'll try to fix that for next year. Tomorrow, we are also having an election meeting. We've had 3 members of the current executive board say they want to come back, and we'll be taking nominations for the rest of the positions tomorrow. We'll be having a discussion about our fountain in Central Park and the repairs and improvements being made to that. The city manager will be coming to our meeting to discuss the initiative that was discussed a little bit earlier about fees and that kind of thing being put up to a vote. So that should be interesting. We have a new beat officer, and this is going to be his first time giving the public safety report there as well. So we have a lot of interesting things going on, and hopefully the folks out there will come out there and join us.
Thank you. Next.
Hey there, Sandy Diaz from Rio Lindo, and we had our meeting on May 23rd. It was really well attended. I was glad about that since that was my first meeting chairing, so it was good. We had Officer Boyson come and talk about some of the issues in our neighborhood, and also our city council person, Madwell. So our main issue was, the speeders who come through our neighborhood and people who fail to stop at stop signs or just make that little California stop. So that discussion will continue. June 1st, we had our bulky drop-off day, and it's a big shout out to the environmental resource team. Don Stevens was our contact person, so we had such wonderful people from the division come out and help us, and I had wonderful volunteers also who helped us tremendously. And let's see, our next meeting will be scheduled for September 26th, and our city manager, Alex Nguyen, will come and talk about the Taxpayer Protection Act. But other than that, it was good.
Thank you, and a big shout out to you, Sandy.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Teresa Salazar for Cal Hisler. The next meeting is on June 11. Our topic is clean up the streets and alleys. And we'll have a neighborhood cleanup in August 24. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else out in the audience? No? Okay. Ramon?
Yes, we're going to have a cleanup on July, La Colonia on Ramon Lopez. We're going to have a cleanup on June 15th. So there's the flyers up there. I look at that, we're going to clean up Oxnard, so I invite all neighborhoods to come. Go on next door, tell your members and all that in your neighborhood, they're allowed to come out and, drop their stuff.
Thank you. Lisa?
Lisa Hewitt, the Dunes Chair, Oxnard Dunes Chair. Our meeting's June 20th. Okay. Our meeting's June 20th, and it's really nice because we'll finally get to use Shoreline 50 Clubhouse. Our city manager will be there, and hopefully Bert Perello. And that's June 20th at 6:30, so come. Channel Islands, you guys are welcome to come.
Dave, you have anything? Okay, so am I. Is there anybody else? No. Oh. Uh-oh.
We have John Hike. Let me unmute him. Go ahead, John.
Okay, I assume I'm unmuted. So anyway, I'm not going to talk about Bryce Canyon North. I'm going to talk about District 6. And just a heads up for our future meeting coming up July 17th from 6:30 to 8 p.m. at the South Oxnard Center, 200 East Bard Road Street. There'll be a neighborhood meeting for the entire District 6 neighborhoods. And Arthur Valenzuela will talk about city updates. And our city manager, Alex Wen, will be talking about the Taxpayer Protection and Government Accountability Act. And of course, there will always also be time set aside for residents to complain or voice concerns. That's it.
Thank you, John. Anybody else? All right, so let's go on to executive board reports. The executive board may individually report on items of interest or concerns. The INCO cannot enter into detailed discussions or take action on any item presented, during these reports. Does anybody have? Okay. Okay. The only thing I have to report is Cyprus now has a new chair, which Naomi Corpez is the chair. And they've been, I think, quiet for maybe a couple years now. So we found Naomi and we got them all set up. And then we had 2 weeks ago Thursday, we had a successful failure at Lemonwood neighborhood. And the reason why I say that is because there was some confusion with the sign that was put up because it said tonight, but it was put up 2 days before the meeting. I didn't have anything to do that, but we did get a handful of people there, but we didn't have a quorum. But the people that did show up were very interested in getting their neighborhood going, so they had asked if we could do it again in 2 weeks, which is tomorrow night. So fingers crossed we'll have a quorum, and they promised to bring enough people, so we'll see, because they are interested in getting their neighborhood going. So hopefully by next month we'll have another neighborhood up and running. And that's all I've got for myself. And you guys don't have anything? Okay. No? Okay. Okay, so let's go to item H, future agenda items. Does anybody have recommendations for future agenda items? And we already probably got it on the agenda.
Good evening, Ronald Arwejo, East Village Neighborhood. I have 2 proposals for items. The first is a presentation by the water districts that cover Oxnard, by the United Water Conservation District and the Calleguas Municipal Water District. If we could just receive a presentation just in regards, we have questions in regard to the water rates. I mean, that was already voted on, but just in general with conservation and the changing policies that have happened in the past couple of years and in the future. If that's proposed, I already have context for both. That could possibly come at an August meeting. I'm not sure if that July 3 meeting is going to happen because it's so close to July 4. So let me know.
Oh, it'll happen somehow.
Okay. But August is the proposal, at least for the time being, but obviously subject to the executive board. So, and the second one is with the coming election that we have a discussion on a potential committee for a candidates forum for the positions of mayor, city clerk, treasurer, and city council candidates. Thank you.
Yeah, and we got that one already covered. We're going to be doing a special meeting for that. Anybody else? Nope. All right. So with that, let's now adjourn. Have a good evening, everybody.